Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBEZ Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, welcome to day 12 of the Devoted Reading Plan. I pray that you have been chugging along. That's 2 complete weeks of reading, and I'm so excited to have you. I'm excited to be joined again by my friends Collin, Shameeka, and Victoria. We are back to study or discuss the last day of our reading here. And so we are going to chapters 32, 33, 34, and 35 of Genesis to wrap up week 2 of our reading plan. So we'll jump right in. We just left off with Jacob and Laban really separating. Jacob has left Laban, they end with a covenant, some other things here. But picking up here in chapter 32, there's another, if I'm reading this like a novel, I'm thinking it's a return of a nemesis, right? Like he's back for the sequel as Esau, his brother, makes his way to meet Jacob. Like he finds out where he is, and Jacob is preparing to meet him. What did you guys find interesting here as Jacob prepares to meet Esau, really in chapter 32?
Well, Jacob was scared.
Yeah.
He was scared. He did not forget that the last time, he encountered his brother, like he was out to kill him. So he's coming back with fear, and he's trying to basically set himself up to like find some kind of grace and favor from Esau. And so the lengths that he took to like, okay, if I do this, like maybe this will like win him over. So yeah, that's something that stuck out to me.
Yeah, definitely the fear part, where like he's literally praying to the Lord, like, oh Lord, okay, the God of my father, you told me to go back to this land, but I'm scared. Like you said, I'm scared because of my brother. And so I love the fact that he actually prayed, for one.
Yeah.
And then for 2, I think I'm really glad that like he kind of reminded God of like, okay, these are your instructions. Like I just want you to like remember you told me to do this.
Yeah.
So I think over the course, I don't see Jacob praying a whole lot, even in his time in Paddan Aram with Laban. But here, I see him calling out, and especially it probably just helped that the angels just showed up in the first verse, the angels of God that met him. And so he is like presently aware and just freshly aware that God is with him and that the angels are with him. And so I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like it was interesting to see how in his preparation to meet Esau, he separates like all of his flock. He separates like his family. And like he separates his the entire tribe from himself.
Yeah.
And it's, like later on, like when we see Jesus talk about this idea of unity in the body, like the thing that causes us to separate as a body is linked to fear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you guys would just all called it out, man. It's so clear that like fear motivates, man, and it causes you to make decisions that aren't always wise, but like even the fact you said it drove him to prayer, which is like, okay, that's a good thing, but also drove him to separate. Like it causes confusion, it causes issues, and we can just see how fear can be so damaging and so really counterproductive in trying to pursue God as needed and as desired. And so, we see that really play out in all of the different ways he tries to avoid Esau, and he tries to avoid meeting him, and tries to at least soften, what that encounter would be like. But along that journey, as he prepares, and I look forward to talking about what actually happens when he does meet Esau here in a sec. But we have this interesting encounter with God that happens right in the middle. So he's preparing to meet Esau. The beginning of 32, he'll meet Esau in 33. We'll get to here in a sec. But there's these verses from 24 through 32 where Jacob has another interesting encounter with God, right? So we already got his dream, right? So that's one place where Jacob has this kind of vision. But now he kind of has this physical encounter, and he wrestles with God. Was there anything significant in this encounter that you guys noticed or wanted to share about?
I just love the fact that he was left alone. Like, that's the part that jumped out to me. Like, we often see in the New Testament that, like, Jesus goes off alone by himself, or even when God has come to Abraham, and sometimes it's just to Abraham. And so I think I love the fact that, like, he is alone, and here God comes to wrestle with him. Sometimes we just need to be alone with God.
Wow.
And I like how the fight took place at night.
Yeah.
And it's like in the moments that people can't see, is like when we feel like we're wrestling with God the most. But it's that strength to endure is where he ultimately gets blessed.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about the blessing is that God doesn't give him any tangible things. He gives him a name and a new name. And it just kind of speaks to what we were talking about at the beginning of Jacob's story. It was his lack of identity, how for his whole life he wanted to be Esau.
Wow.
And what God was showing him is that you don't need to be another Esau. I made you to be Israel.
Yeah.
And I think that's significant because of even where this is placed, right? That this happens before he encounters Esau, right? Before he gets to see him again. It is important that God almost gets to like interrupt, right? And say, let me just remind you, or even just tell you, who I have made you to be. Because I don't want you running into Esau and then just trying to throw yourself at his feet and submit yourself to him.
Yeah.
And then trying to, give up everything that I've blessed you with to try to please him or to do that. Like, let me remind you that I have something separate and different for you that I've declared for you. And like you said, I declare that even just in your name, Israel.
Yeah, I love that. It's like he was preparing to wrestle with Esau potentially, but like the Lord kind of stopped him, like, no, your biggest fight's with me. Like, just this is what matters. Like this relationship between you and me, this battle that we have going on. And he said to see that a blessing has come from it. It just kind of reinforces this whole, like, I'm here to bless you. So when I said, like, I'll be with you, I'm going to be with you. Like, when I say I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to take care of you. Like, we can duke it out, but at the end of the day, like, I'm here for you. And you said I'm giving you a new purpose, a new identity, which I think, like you pointed out, Collin, is so unique because Isaac didn't get that. Like, he didn't get a new name, but Abraham did. Yeah. And Jacob did. And so it's just like this newfound purpose because, Jacob wasn't Isaac's favorite anyway. So, it probably just gave him like a new, like, no, I'm your father. I'm naming you. Like, you are mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I meant to mention it in previous chapters, and like you reminded me of, like, I just really see God delighting and blessing people. It's like he finds joy in being able to bless his children and give them these things that are just beautiful to have, or just fruitful to have, or just like, reminders of God's love. So yeah, I just thought that was really cool that you pointed that out, because I just really do believe that God finds delight in blessing his children.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And my limp matters, like, because it's a sign of where I've been and what I've been through.
Yeah, it's a symbol. It's good. So after this interruption, Jacob gets to finally meet Esau. And I don't think it goes the way Jacob anticipated. What was interesting to you guys about just the way Jacob, kind of meets Esau here?
Verse 4, so beautiful. Like Esau running up to Jacob and embracing him, and like, even kissing him, and them weeping together. Like, I don't know, it just really showed this love that they had for each other, but also I'm like, sounds like they missed each other too. Like, we really expected probably a different outcome. And even Jacob, like he did so much leading up to that, but the fact that he was embraced, like, it reminded me of the prodigal son, just like the father, like arms open wide, like, come here, like, man, like, I've been waiting for this moment to see you again. And so I thought that was beautiful.
And it's like, that's his twin. Like,
yes, yeah.
Like, they are like, probably, although they had their little moments, they're probably buddied up, like, their whole entire life. And when we saw Esau earlier, we saw him as this, like, in the moment, like, irrational person.
Right.
So I feel like most of his emotions is driven in the moment.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why Rachel was just like, well, just wait until your brother settles down. And when he calms down and he's out of the moment, just give him some time. Because she probably know her son. Like, she probably knew, like, in this moment, he wants to kill you, but just give him time, and he's not.
Yeah.
Because, in the moment, he's going to sell his birthright because he's about to die. Like, and so I feel like he's really in the moment. So, like, after 14 years, like, he's probably like, yeah, like, I'm over that.
Yeah.
And I'm probably just missing my brother. And like you said, even just in this moment of, like, experiencing this reunion, like, he's weeping and he's hugging, like, he's in the moment. Like, this is who Esau is. And so I loved seeing that out of him.
And I love in this preparation how, like, Jacob thinks that Esau is going to kill him. And he is preparing for this moment that Esau is going to be completely angry. And this is why I love verse 10 the most, because when he runs up to Esau and he sees that Esau loves him, he says, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. And when I think about, like, how we evangelize today, we try to be like God, but the way that we become like God is in our ability to forgive. And it's like, the more that we're able to forgive others and love others, the more they're able to see God for who He is.
Yes.
That's so good.
Yes, Collin.
That's real good.
And it struck me as I was reading this that I believe this is the first example of forgiveness we've gotten. That it took us to chapter 33, right, to even see an example. We've seen a lot of justice. We've seen some mercy, right? We've seen a lot of just wrath and retaliation. But I don't think until this point, we have not seen forgiveness. And it's so clearly defined, right? Esau does not believe Jacob owes him anything.
That's true, yeah.
Like, this isn't reconciliation or retribution. This is not, you pay me back for what you did, right? And now we're even,
right?
Because you've given me back. It is, you are forgiven. You don't owe me nothing. I love you despite all that you did, and I'm just giving this to you. As much as you insist on trying to do for me, I don't want it. I've already forgiven you. And I think that, like, it is this beautiful picture, and it's the first example we really get, right? Without even using the word forgiveness. Like, the word's not even really used in this passage, but we see that he absolutely genuinely forgives his brother. And it's such a beautiful picture. And I love that you brought that up, because you're right. Like, that is how we look like God. It is how it is, we forgive others as he has forgiven us. We love others as he has loved us, right? We show grace to others as he has shown grace to us. And that is how we give it. But, like, this picture, man, is so beautiful, and it's hard. Like, we look at it, and you're right. The last time we left off with Esau, he is pissed. Like, we know he was mad. But now at this point, he's forgiven, and it's a beautiful picture of what forgiveness really looks like.
And now that you say that, I'm thinking, it's like, if this is the first chapter that we see forgiveness, and it took us 33 chapters, Is that why it took Jesus 33 years?
Come on, something.
You about to make me drop this mic off this stand.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Oh, jeez. Yeah. Wow. I don't even know what to say to that. I don't know where to go next. Golly. Yeah, the association is uncanny. But yeah, I mean, it took us 33 chapters. Wow. But yeah, it is. It's just beautiful, like to see it play out here. And again, it doesn't go as expected. And back to kind of what I think, Victoria, you've kind of alluded to this some. I think it is often like our relationship with God, because I think we do expect God's wrath often, right? Like we expect the worst from him, and he just responds with love and forgiveness and mercy and grace in times that we're just like, you know what, I deserve it this time. You're right. You know, if this don't work out, like, I get it, God, it was my fault. You know, I messed up, and he just still responds with more forgiveness, and grace and love and mercy. And I think Jacob didn't even know what to do with it. Like, he was like, I don't even know what to do with this. Like, I'm so confused right now, because I know I would have earned every bit of what you offered if that happened. And so, yeah, that's a huge takeaway for us, that we ought to extend that same forgiveness to others. Anything else in their encounter that was significant to you guys that you saw?
I just think it's interesting that Jacob ended up in the land of Canaan again, you know?
Yeah, like he didn't follow him. They were supposed to be basically going to the same place, right? Yeah. And he refused to kind of like almost have any strings attached of like, no, you know, you go ahead of me. Yeah. I wonder what that was about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it repeats this pattern of manipulation that we've seen in Jacob, right? Because it'd been one thing if he just flat out told Esau, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm not going there. Like, I got this other place I'm going. Yeah. But he gives Esau the impression that he is going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he tells him that he plans to follow him later. And so I do think that even after the forgiveness and after all of that Esau's done, that he's still just like, yeah, I'm gonna go this way. Like, I don't know. This doesn't seem real. I'm just going to go this other way. Yeah, it's too good to be true. I'm just going to go this way instead. So very interesting. Anything else from 33? Okay. Y'all ready? It's about to get a little dramatic again. Here we go. Chapter 34. And, you know, I don't know how you guys are reading. So maybe you're reading and listening. Maybe you're just listening. But this definitely reads like a murder mystery podcast type thing if you just listen to the Bible version, like the Bible app version of this. But so yeah, we get this unfortunate situation where Leah's daughter Dinah is defiled, and there's a response from her sons, from Leah's sons, as well as some of the others. Anything that just jumped out to you guys? I mean, one, even just like why this is included, I think is an interesting question in passage of scripture. But yeah, anything that just jumped out to you guys about how this was handled by Simeon and Levi?
I was just gonna say that, like, I appreciate Dinah's brothers sticking up for her and like seeing this as like something that was detestable, and like, man, like they really didn't let it just slide, or, you know, didn't let this just act happen and like nothing, you know, take place. So although there was deceit on their end on how they did it, I do feel like, I'm like, man, yeah, they got what they deserved. Because one, is weird that, you know, the one who raped Dinah like falls in love with her, and he's like, oh wait, like you take advantage of her, but then you're asking for her to be your wife. Like, you did it all wrong, first of all. Like, you know, the way he went about it. And so just seeing like how they did use the act of circumcision in their favor of like, okay, now they're weak. They laid out, like they're in a process of healing. This is a perfect time to, you know, eventually like kill them. And yeah, I thought it was justified. I thought that it was, I almost want to say honorable in the sense of like for them to see their sister the way they did, love her the way that they loved her, and really, you know, just be those big brothers that took up for her. Yeah.
I think, you know, just how this whole thing starts out with Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite. I just go back all the way to Isaac when he's telling them, please do not sleep with these Hivite women.
Yeah.
And Esau does it anyway. And it's like, we just read over that verse. And it's like, you know, Esau's anger towards Isaac, it may not have appeared or reared its head in that chapter, but we see that the effects of it in, you know, Genesis 34.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of times with our mistakes and our reckless behavior, it might not show up in, you know, the first year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, that sin will develop over time, and it'll develop into stuff like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really shocked by how quiet Jacob stayed.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this your daughter. I don't know if it's because it was Leah's daughter and not, you know, a child of Rachel, that like he didn't feel this like overwhelming
Right.
need to like spearhead this, or if he was trying to like, you know, be more of a politician about these things, and, you know, he said like, we don't know the people, you know, and or maybe he was just trying to protect, you know, like you say, he was fearful that they could, you know, be overtaken by these men. But I think it was interesting that the passion and the anger and the frustration you don't see from Jacob.
Yeah.
Like you only see that from the sons.
Yeah.
And so as Shameeka was saying, like sometimes I'm like, okay, yeah, y'all go ahead. Like,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and stick up for your sister because your father's not, you know.
Yeah.
And so
And I wonder if, like, the later verses that describes how Jacob, he was more concerned about how he was gonna look,
Right.
and like,
Right.
you know, after the fact of what they did. Like, I wonder if that's why he was so quiet, because he's like weighing his options. He's like, all right, like he wanted to have favor with the Canaanites and these people. Like he wanted to be in right standing with them, and so his reputation meant more than, like, you know, the soul of his daughter. At the end of the day, which was very selfish.
right. Which was kind of like, you know, Lot, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm willing to give up my daughters to
Yes.
just keep the peace here. It's like, no, that's all wrong.
Yeah, and I think that it's relevant because, I mean, I think very often we have a tough time standing up for righteousness for the sake of fear. Right?
Yeah.
Like we have a tough time saying like, I'm going to do what's right despite how, like, what the consequences may be, right? Despite how it may make me look, despite how others may think of me, despite, you know, what the backlash may be or the pushback may be, you know. And like ultimately Jacob was more fearful of the, you know, response from those around him than he was for, you know, of God and just doing the right thing in that regard. So it was very interesting. I think I just came away with just like, you know, Hamor's like his just audacity, like to come back, like you said, to ask for her as a wife, like Shechem is just like the audacity to come to me, like it's one thing for, like what you did, it's another thing to come to me and just be like, yeah, can I have her as a wife? Like, hold up, why are you even in my house right now? Like, but it is very interesting, as you said, just the lack of passion on Jacob's part, foreseeing something, you know, through in that regard. Because he ultimately rebukes both, you know, Levi and Simeon, like, you did the wrong thing here. You know what I mean? You made things hard on me.
And I honestly just wonder, like, what would God have wanted him to do? Like, not saying that what they did was the right answer, right? And the right response. But like I said, in this situation, I wonder if he called out to God and prayed and asked the Lord, like, what do I do in that situation? I wonder what God would have responded with.
That's so true.
Yeah, and I guess, like, the tension that he has is really between Simeon and Levi, and, you know, ultimately these are who, like, the Levites come from, and, you know, these were the priests and, you know, the guardians of the law, and it's like, this is really no right answer in this moment, because we don't know where we would have sided. But I think what this maps is the difference between the law And what Jacob tries to do is exude grace.
Yeah.
And so, now we're able to see both sides, and then it kind of sets up Jesus. Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, and he's the one that exudes grace. So.
Okay. Well, to wrap up the day, we get to chapter 35, and Jacob is told by God to get up and to go to Bethel and to settle there. And it's there that ultimately Rachel dies, Isaac dies. We kind of get some other stuff here, but anything that just jumped out to you guys here in chapter 35 as he returns to Bethel?
Yes. I'm like, Jacob waited to this moment to finally get rid of the foreign god.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Like, out of all the things, like, as if it's just, I couldn't wrap my head around, like, what was it for Jacob why was this moment so significant for him to be like, okay, yeah, let's get rid of these guys. Like, cleanse yourself, purify yourself, like, get rid of them. And this is the same place that he was at where he had poured the oil on the rock and said this place he was going to make it, the house of God, but it had stipulations with it.
Yeah.
He's coming back to this place, but again, like, maybe it was that remembrance of, oh, this is God's house and his encounter that caused him to be like, okay, let's get rid of these foreign guys because they ain't going to stand a chance and they don't belong here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I was like, well, wow, like it's still a part of so many people in his household's practice.
Yes.
Like these foreign gods. Like, I just wonder, like, what the leadership was in terms of, like, following Yahweh solely up until this point, right? Like, was he, like, teaching them or, like, encouraging them or, like, what was it, that he was doing to show them, like, this is how we live before the Lord? It was, we know that he's also still figuring it out himself, too, right? Figuring out who God is for himself. But, I think I was just interested in, like, there was this lack of shepherding them to know who Yahweh was up until this point.
Yeah. Seemed to be more and more gods, too, like, that was accumulated over time.
Yeah.
Maybe like his travels back to Canaan and all that stuff. Like, the more he just went back, the more they kept picking up on more gods and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's just interesting is how similar, like, I had to do this and just did it again now just to make sure I had to do this when I was reading earlier this week, that, like, I read 35 and I was like, I read this before. Right? And then, like, you go back to 28 and you see, it's very similar to what happens when Jacob gets to Bethel in chapter 28, and he sets up the stone and he pours the oil on it, and, like, just reading it, I'm just like, this is very interesting. God confirms the promise again. He sets up the marker again. Like, he does this, and again, it's just so interesting. And back to one of the points, just made earlier, just the repetition of God's confirmation of promises, but also kind of returning to this place and doing some of the same things here again.
Yeah.
Because it literally just felt like I was like, I read this. This has already happened once before in scripture.
Yeah. And I wonder if this time he actually means it. Like, I think probably for Jacob, he probably did grow up seeing certain customs or certain things that was done that honored God, and maybe he just did it out of, like, repetition of what he saw, but his heart wasn't really, like, in it. So now he's, like, doing this again, and who knows, like, I mean, we'll read the chapters later on and maybe they'll speak more about it, but for Jacob, he was like, okay, let me do this again.
Yeah. Because I think it's interesting because, like you said, God had already changed his name to Israel. And in Abraham's case, when God changed his name from Abram to Abraham, like, he immediately went to going by Abraham for the rest of the text.
Yep.
And Sarai was now Sarah for the rest of the text. Like, and that was like an immediate switch. And so, and that was interesting that, like, he said his name was Israel, and then they go back to calling him Jacob until this point again. And now, following that, he's considered Israel at some point, and then Jacob at some point. I think it's interesting. It's not like a hard to find. This is your new name,
Right.
and then he leaves again. Which once again, I'm like, why'd you leave Bethel?
Mm-hmm.
And he told you to go to Bethel. Like, why are we leaving Bethel now?
Yeah.
And now Rachel has this hard labor and she dies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is, that fulfillment of kind of what we talked about yesterday, that it is ultimately her womb and giving birth that kills her. And, at this point, Jacob is grieving the loss of, the one woman he officially loved. But, it's going to be hard to not read this and just think about that idol again.
Yeah.
That God that she was sitting on. But anything else from 35? Is that just jumping out to you guys?
And right after that, I think it's interesting. Like, this must have been such a low season for Israel with Jacob. Like he's moving again.
Yeah.
He loses his wife. Mm-hmm. Then the next verse, his son sleeps with one of his concubines, and it's kind of like, well,
yeah.
It's just like everything's happening at one time, like a snowball effect, and he heard of it. And once again, he's not the one to retaliate or make a big fuss. There's nothing more that he says of it. But what we notice about Jacob is that he is one that sits and he processes and he plans and he can stick things out for a long time. So it's really not even until he dies that we see
he doesn't forget. He doesn't forget. He don't forget.
Yeah, because he tells Reuben about himself when he's on his deathbed, and says, Reuben, you not gonna get the blessing that you're supposed to, because you was in my bed. You defiled my bed with my concubine. So I think it's really interesting, though, that he's not one to have an immediate conflict, right? But he's always planning and processing.
Interesting. Yeah, so we get that lineage of his sons, now all 12 of them, now that Benjamin has been born. And then Isaac dies. And anything, only a couple of verses here, but anything significant from that?
This death caused the reunion of the brothers again. Kind of like Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah.
Where, again, the last encounter Jacob had with Esau, he was supposed to be going with him to the same place. And now you see that they're brought together as a result of having to bury their father. So, wonder what that conversation was like. Like, Esau, what happened to you, man? Like, did you get lost?
Right. You already know Jacob making something up.
Yeah, I also wondered, because this is the first time I believe we're seeing that, that Jacob and Isaac were in the same vicinity again.
Right.
And so I wonder, he did all of this with, the birthright and the blessing, but then he was gone for 14 years. And so I wondered, how much of that he still received, which I'm believing he still did at some point. And came up to receive. But what we learned earlier is that Isaac was extremely wealthy. He was extremely wealthy. And so I wonder if eventually he did, once he did come back around at some point, receive that blessing and be able to walk in that.
Yeah, that is interesting, because we did get to see Abraham leave Isaac everything, but it doesn't say that Isaac left anything or.
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation would be that he did, and it would not happen until he died.
Right.
All of that is given. So, anything he inherited would have been at this point. But, I again, this is kind of a subtle thing, but I do love just these reunions of sons kind of at this, and it's funny. It's something I think I still see today, right? At the point of loss, we just gotta bury whatever it was, and show up for people. And you saw that there, because again, Isaac and Ishmael, they really get along, right? That's why Ishmael got kicked out, because he was over here bullying Isaac, and Sarah wasn't having it. And then Jacob and Esau, they really get along. They had their issues and stuff, but ultimately, man, in those lowest points, you just got to show up for people. And I had a pastor tell me once, and it's just something that's always stuck to me, that like people will often forget like when you show up in their best moments. Like you can think about, those of you that been married and had your wedding, you could probably name most of the people that showed up there, but there's some people that you'll be like, man, I forgot you was at my wedding, right? But like they never forget when you show up in their lowest moments. Like those times when you really needed people, like you remember those moments and those people. And I just think that like in both of these examples of when Abraham dies, when Isaac dies, it's in those low moments that people showed up. And they were there and they were present. And I think it's definitely a takeaway for us. But man, it's a convenient way to kind of end our week. Isaac has died. When we started, Isaac was born at the beginning of this week, and now he has died, and so we've gotten a lot of that story. But yeah, appreciate you guys joining us in week 2 for the Devoted Reading Plan. Look forward to seeing you guys on Monday, and next week we actually conclude all of Genesis, so we will finish the book of Genesis by the end of next week, which is really fun. But until then, have a great weekend. Take care. Love you.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take